What the heck are callables? If you've ever connected a signal through code in Godot, you've probably noticed that one of the arguments is something called a callable. But what exactly is that thing? Well, to put it in simple terms, in Godot, a callable is a special kind of object that lets you reference a function as if it were a value, which means we could pass it around, store it in a variable, or simply just call it later. And there are quite a few uses that we could use this for outside of just signals. And let's go ahead and jump in and take a look at these. So I've got two functions here. I have my ready, and I have a variable called callable where I can pass in, or where I can create a callable for this. So let's go ahead. We'll say C equals, right? So I'm going to assign a callable to this. And all we're going to do is do callable, and that takes two arguments, right? So we're going to put in self, and then we'll pass in hello world. There we go. And if we were to run this, we take a look. Oh, it takes an argument. My mistake. Roger. No, it's not that. I'm just a dummy. So we created this callable, but I didn't actually call it. So we created this callable. What this is doing is the first object is the object that holds a function, and the second argument is the function that you want to call. So we're calling hello world on self. So we're saying self, this script has the function hello world, which it does. And now we can just do c.call, and in this case pass in an argument, because this takes an argument of a new name. And now you can see it gets called. Likewise, we could use call twice. Right, we can do call twice and pass in our function of C. Right, the callable that we created. Now it's going to give us an error in this case just because I didn't put in that it expected an argument here. So I'll just go into my call here, and I'll just put in Roger and Billy. Right, that's the default things to put in there. And we run it, and there we go. Hello Roger, hello Billy. Right, so all we're doing is referencing a function on some kind of object, and in this case storing it in this variable that we could then use for later. So if we wanted to say get this object, right, it's a child of it, just called control, and we wanted to access the greeting function on here, and let me just remove that event for now, we could. The object in this case would be get node control or get child 0, whichever you wanted to go with, right? Doesn't really matter. And I'm just going to use c.call. All right, so we're going to call that callable, and we'll see it works just fine. Oh, we're calling hello world. That's right. We changed it. It'll be greeting on there. So we see we ran into an error because that function did not exist on that object. So if we run it now, it's going to run hello Mr. Rogers, because greeting exists on this object, which we can see right here. So that's how a callable works. Two arguments. The first one is the object that has the function you want, and the second argument is the function that you want to call that the object has. So why use callables when we could just call functions directly, right? We could just do get node. For example, we could just do get node control, and call greeting, right? And run that and have the exact same result. So why would we use callables for anything? Well, a callable is a dynamically assigned behavior, so we could always change this or create this on the fly later on. We could use this to store methods in arrays or dictionaries, or we could, as you may have experienced already, use this for custom signals. And of course, regular signals doesn't have to be a custom one, but with signals, as I mentioned at the beginning. Now, a basic example would be this call twice that we could do, and where we just pass in our callable, and we could do something with that. Something a little more advanced would be our signals, which it's not really explained to you. You just kind of gotta know to kind of put a callable in there. I don't know if you heard that from upstairs, but again, at the space, we have the first one is an object, and the second argument is the function that exists on that object. So what is something that would be more, let's say, something more akin to what we may use? Well, let's go ahead. I'm going to create some actions up here. And with this, we can see we're creating in a dictionary. We have a key, and then our value is going to be a callable that is assigned to that key. And on ourself, we're going to call a function called dowalk, which of course we don't have. And I wish I could just right click and be like, oh yeah, create. Yeah, see, we can just create code reads and that's about it, which is unfortunate. But it is what it is, right? So let's come on down. Function dowalk. Right, print. We're walking, right? And then we have the other one, do run, print, running. Right, so now we could just do actions walk.call, right? So you could, for example, replace this with anything that you wanted to put in there. But if we go ahead and do walk, you can see we're calling walking. And if we pass in the key of run, we could be running. So you see, you can store these inside of something like a dictionary to be called later, and you could use this for different kind of games, or to respond based off of the action that's being pressed, rather than something similar to like if our input, right? So maybe we have these stored as like, well, animation doesn't really make sense because you would use an animation player in that case, but you get the idea, right? Now this replaced something that used to be called funcref, and this was basically just a reference to a function, right? So back in the day, it would be something like this, right? Funcref do run, and then we could just call fr.call, and that would get our reference to a function, which name-wise, that probably makes more sense to a lot of you rather than callable, but it's the same kind of principle. Object, a function on that object, then you could call it. And this is how it's working with signals, right? So we connect, and it's working with a function as well, or sorry, a signal, right? You connect a signal, and then you pass in a callable. So you're saying when this signal is received, call this function from this object. Right, so here's just one example that you can use this with. All right, I'm just using that same actions setup here, and when I'm walking forward, if I'm holding shift, then I'm going to have this run function, right? This run function from our actions dictionary back up top, trigger. And if I'm not holding shift and I'm just going forward, I'm going to call the walk key from our actions dictionary. So just as an example, right? To have things happen, but we're storing them just inside of like a dictionary like this. So if I walk forward, I'm walking, and as soon as I hit shift, I'm running, walking, running, walking, right? So you can have different things happen function-wise, right? And just kind of store it into the name of your action in this case. So you can think about doing this with, say we have a turn-based game, right? You can get a list of keys, which will be, in this case, are run and walk, but it could be attack, use item, or just items, run, etc., right? And then just take those keys, add them to a menu, because then you don't have to edit things all over the place, right? Because it's already part of a dictionary. Just add them to the menu. When that option is selected, just run that option as a function like this. And then that could populate your inventory field. That could trigger the run animation and run chance. This could perform or call for a basic attack to happen, right? Call for a magic attack or effect to happen. And when you start thinking about things like this, then you start realizing how powerful the callables could be, or how useful they could be. So hopefully this makes sense as to giving you some ideas as to how you might be able to use these callables. That's kind of in a cleaner way, in my opinion, to just writing out big functions for it. Even though technically I guess you still would, but yeah, you get that idea, and hopefully you understand what a callable is at its core, and probably for like the 20th time in this video. It's a function from the second argument that exists on the object from the first argument. Right, so this could be self, if it's a function that lives on this script, or it could be an object if the function lives on a different object or script. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing. I kind of feel like at least I felt like I went everywhere. But anyway, that's it. Take care. Have yourselves a good one. Hopefully you're not more confused now than when you started. And I'll see you guys next week.